I am thrilled today to have as my guest Richard Watson. Richard is the president and CEO of Bridgehill Learning Solutions. And Richard, this is a first, the very first client of mine, voiceover client that I have invited on the channel. And before we started recording, I was saying I don't even know why that's the case. As I think about it, this totally makes sense because one of the things that you have heard me say over the years is that to do a good job as a voice talent, we need to make sure that we make our clients heroes to their clients. So everything we do is in service to what they're trying to accomplish. It's not about our voice or our performance. I mean, what we're doing, what we need to facilitate what it is they're trying to do and make
Right.
sure that the end client is happy. And Richard, just let me say, first of all, welcome. It's a real thrill to have you here today.
Hey, thanks for the invite. No, I agree. I think what we're talking about here is collaboration, right? And it's a
Yeah.
partnership that we're both trying to accomplish the same thing. You know, we in the end have the same client. Yes, I'm your client, but in the end, my client is your client as well, because we want to produce a really nice, polished result for the end user in this case, which for us is the actual learner at the very end of all of it, who has to sit through and take these particular e-learning modules, these courses. So yeah, totally. So it's
I
partnership.
think it's important to say also that, I mean, you're a thought leader in the industry. I mean, you have the ear of a lot of people. You have a sense of what's going on. So, when you speak, you don't just speak from a very isolated, corner of the universe. Even though it is, you're doing primarily your work, your company, but you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on within the industry. So what you say should carry a lot of weight for us. So now it certainly does for me. And you've even written some books. We want to mention some of the books you've written on the topic of instructional design or learning. Or well, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, it's been about a year or two ago. I put together a little series of books on Amazon that really was focused for e-learning freelancers, getting in the business, how to find clients, how to manage your projects and things of that nature. So collaborated with a friend of mine to kind of put it into a Kindle book format, and probably should do some more, some little shorter things, but hopefully people had found it useful. Some people say it's too much at a whopping $4.95, but it's kind of felt like they were cheated, but I don't know what else to do. I mean, that's
It's
a
an
lot.
interesting day in which we live, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I tinker with doing some more down the road and trying to get some information. I have done this for a long time, so kind of think I've made a lot of the mistakes along the way, and why not share those so somebody else doesn't have to do the same. So
Well, we're very excited to get your perspective again as somebody who hires voiceover talent. I mean, this not to put too much pressure on you, but for us, this is gold. I mean, this is a chance to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And I mean that in the best possible,
yeah, yeah,
possible way.
no worries.
So the topic today essentially is this: what are the challenges that a voiceover client like Richard, dealing specifically in e-learning, what is the challenges that you face, that maybe the biggest challenges you face in working with voiceover talent? What can you help us to understand and learn?
Yeah, I mean, today we're going to talk about a few. I mean, overall, I think my experience with most professional voiceovers are very professional. They're very timely in getting information to you. I think sometimes though that speed of trying to get something back to you kind of messes with the quality control side of things. And I think for me, sometimes when I'm talking to professional voiceover people, it's like, okay, I can do turnaround. I can have it back to you in an hour, right? And that's great, totally great. But if it sacrifices quality, I'd rather get it back the next day, right? So one of the challenges that I run into on occasion comes from articulation, right? Articulating words correctly or on a re-record. So for example, we'll have a script that goes out, and I deal a lot in healthcare, so there occasionally have words that are mispronounced, which is not unusual. So I try to provide pronunciations, and whether it's a link to a YouTube video or audio, whatever we got to do to help get that correct pronunciation. So that works really well. But I'm seeing several times in that quick turnaround, what happens is we'll send out and say, I'll send out a script. I'll get get back the files, I'll listen and say, oh, okay, that word's mispronounced. I need to get this corrected. So I'll send it back to the professional voiceover person who will then turn it around very quickly and get it back. And then on occasion, what happens is I'll get it back and that word is pronounced correctly, but now I have another word that was pronounced correctly before that's now mispronounced. And so I get caught in this back and forth loop, which is, not very conducive to productivity for me to keep going back and say, okay, but it was right. Can you fix this? Right. So, that's something that I run into quite frequently.
Like whack-a-mole, right? You knock one down, then another one pops up. That's
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So I don't know if has a lot to do with the quick turnaround or attention to detail, but it is something that, because what I'm expecting is it's not the major deal to have to get something repronounced. It's just part of what happens. It's just that when you get that fixed and you open up another one, it's like, and I've had situations where I have to go back maybe 2 times, 3 times, which is again not very conducive to what I do, because that's time I have to spend putting the email together, explaining what's wrong, and then waiting, getting the file. But so luckily I do that type of QC before I ever bring it into an e-learning module, because once it's in the e-learning module and I'm syncing everything to it, it can become pretty time consuming to have to drop that back in and then fix it.
Right, right. Now, let's talk just a second, if we can, about, you mentioned speed.
Right.
And in my experience, overwhelmingly, most of the clients I work with, they don't tell me I need it next week. I
Right.
need it in 3 days. It's like the question is almost always, how fast can you get this back to me? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, voiceover is typically the last link in the production chain. Would that be pretty safe to say? Pretty much everything else is done. At that, when you come to a voiceover
Yeah.
talent,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, because I
yeah,
typically, and we'll talk later, I use text to speech or something like that in an alpha build to get the flow and everything. And before I
right,
ever get to a professional voiceover, because I want to make sure if they want to make changes to the scripts, they can see it with the content.
yes.
I come back and do the beta release. That's when I bring in the professional voiceover. And hopefully at that point, because I've already fixed all graphics, visuals, things like that, we're just really focused on the voiceover part of it.
And I think it's probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's probably safe to say that a voiceover talent has to be both good, professional, meaning they, get the pronunciations right as best they can. Obviously, there'll be some exceptions to that, things that are, way out there,
Right.
but also fast. When I say fast, I mean, timely. And these things need to be, I would imagine, discussed with you ahead of time to find out what your expectations are.
Right. Now, for me, I mean, because I do a lot of project management, I never design a project with I need a turnaround in hours. I don't do that, right? For what
You
I do.
might be the exception to the rule.
Maybe I am. I mean, because I plan it out, and I mean, the quicker turnaround becomes important to me in any re-records, right? Because at that point, the whole project is at a halt until I
Yeah.
get that fixed audio file back. So for me, then that quick turnaround means something only when I'm coming back for re-records. But a 2 to 3 day delay for me uh, is not a major issue for me, because it's just planned in the overall project.
Okay, I see. And another question along this line, let me ask you this, because I'm always curious. Let me tell you the way my method when I'm dealing with, so there are some things, and I do probably the bulk of my work is pharmaceutical. I don't know that there's a pharmaceutical company I don't record for. It feels that way sometimes, anyhow.
Right.
And so there's always stuff, and oftentimes that will be provided, but sometimes it's just not. And so, I'll go online and I'll research, but sometimes it's just really difficult to find, or there's even discrepancies between professionals discussing the topic. You might get a slightly different version. So what I typically do is, instead of stopping the workflow to like email you, and I'm saying you, for example, say, hey Richard, I'm not sure about this word. What I'll do is I'll just take my best educated guess and I'll go ahead and complete it and I'll send it back, knowing that if it's wrong, you'll let me know. But there's a good chance it'll also be right. Therefore, saving the halt in production by me stopping and saying, and then waiting for you to get back to me. Is that, from your perspective, does that make sense, or do I have this all backwards?
You're talking about pronunciations?
Yeah, yeah. Is it best that I just do the best I can, send it to you, and then let you tell me if I'm wrong?
That I think that depends on different voiceover artists. I mean, you and I have done some work in the past, and that it makes sense for me when you and I are working. If I haven't worked with them before, I never know. I kind of like to trust a voiceover person to get the articulation correct, right? I
Yeah.
don't, it's
Yeah.
not, and when I get it back, it's not a big deal for me to go back and have it done correctly. And it's specifically if I work with someone out of country, right? They may pronounce something entirely different,
Right.
laboratory versus laboratory, and right. And so those become a little bit more important if they're if that word is used quite a bit out through the content, then we want to get it right up front. So maybe that's how I look at it. If I have a word that's being repeated multiple times across tracks, then I would say it's be better to get that one correct. But in those cases, I'll probably send a voiceover recording and record the word the way it needs to be pronounced, right? But most of the time, it's pretty accurate in what I get. I think if you're a
Okay.
professional voiceover person, I would think that you would want to do that. And you never know how somebody is going to pronounce a word specifically in medical. Medical can be quite tricky, in
Yes.
a lot of ways. And if you've recorded, well, I'll be looking for, if I'm doing something in the medical, I always look for a professional voiceover person that's done medical recording before, because they're more in tune to how certain words are pronounced.
Right. Right.
Right.
Okay, go
So,
well.
yeah.
What other challenges do you have working with voiceover talent?
So this is another one of a minor, but again, it's all about things that impact the workflow. And so that would be what I call it, like bad file splits. And so I think, most of the narration I request, I like to have it split into individual files, because that makes it a lot easier for me to bring it into where I need to do it, as opposed to me having to listen to it and do my own file splits. So I always do file splits. Um, with the exception, I've done some informational videos for clients, and those don't really require file splits. So it's just one 2-minute recording. But I get occasionally I think it has more to do with that quick turnaround and that rush to get it out to me. So you'll get splits in that you'll have, say, audio file 1, audio file 2 and 3, and audio file 2 will have some remnant of the end of audio file 1 in it.
Oh, interesting.
Or audio file 2 will be cut too late and have some of audio file 3 in it. So it's just splitting in the right place. And obviously, those are things that I can fix pretty easily, unless I run into a situation where there's an inflection of the voice that I can't fix. It's like you're on the up. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do that. So that's where I'll go back. So very rarely do I go back to fix those kind of things. Go back to the voiceover person saying, fix it for me, because it's just quicker for me to cut it. Right.
Right.
And it's not a major thing. I'll see it usually in every other project, I'll see a couple files that were split incorrectly. So it's just attention to detail kind of thing. But luckily for me, because it's something that I can literally write within the application, clip the audio, cut it out. It doesn't become a problem for me to fix it, but it is another step that I have to do, which means, I have to listen to it carefully. And when I pick it up, then I say, okay, I see what I've got to do with, so I need to fix that. So anyway, I'll do that most of the time. So there you
Is it
go.
important for you to have like consistency of in terms of length, like of silence at the begin and end, that they're all pretty much the same?
Yeah, I mean, and that can add a lot of work. I mean, occasionally, I don't know, been a few years ago, I had a voiceover narrator that sent me, and they were real kind of inconsistent in the amount of silence they had at the beginning of it, of the track. So sometimes it might be, just 2 seconds. Other times it might have been 5. And that kind of throws off the sync and timing of things. So, one of the things I like about the files that I've gotten from you is they're always appear to me always be to the exact amount of silence at the beginning. So what happens on my side, if you don't have the right amount of silence, then when I go from one slide to the next, that audio will kick in too quickly.
Yeah.
So my solution to it is typically I have to drag the audio track a little further down the timeline to get that silence. But again, it's small, it's not major changes, it's just little small changes, but those are little things that happen that I typically don't want to account for, because you get enough of them and then my post editing starts to go through the ceiling, where I'm making
Yeah.
edits. You can kind of see it's accumulative. Any of themselves are not really major things, but the cumulative start to add up in some situations.
Well, and what we give you as voiceover talent should be plug and play. You shouldn't have to think about it, worry about it. You should be able to drop it in, walk away, and that's
Yes. And when you get that, and then you don't get that, you really
yeah,
notice, right?
right.
I
Okay.
can say, I mean, all seriousness aside, every file that I've gotten from your narration on my client projects, I haven't had to do anything to. I don't deal with volumes, I don't deal with pacing, I don't deal with anything, right? I'm not even sure if we've had to do a re-record, to be honest with you. And but I mean, it's you get used to that where, man, it's like if I have to drop these in and I don't change anything, then that really is what I'm looking for. And it may be expecting too much. I don't know, but when you get it and then you don't get it, you really see the difference in the timing it takes to get the product from me, because I've got to wait to get it from you. Once I get it from you, I've got to build it in, then I've got to get it to the client. And so anything that makes that process go faster is much better for both of us, I think.
Well, that's an important lesson for voiceover talent. We need to deliver a plug and play product. What I
Yeah.
know you've got one or two others. What
Yeah.
else? What else can we do better?
So I think you see it. This is something that does happen quite frequently. Specifically when you give me the files, we pop them in, it goes off the client. The client's going to have, who knows, several days to review. Could be up to a week or more to review and give me feedback. So let's say that we have something that was recorded a week or 2 weeks ago. Client comes back and they want to change a particular sentence or something. And so obviously we send it back to get it re-recorded. What I run into sometimes is when that re-record comes back, it's at a different volume than what you gave me a week and a half before, or it's at a different pace. And that
Hmm.
becomes really obvious in narration in e-learning modules. Volume I can possibly bring down and tweak it a little bit. Pace I can't do much of anything with.
Yeah.
So to me, that back into that consistency, right? About, I'm expecting to drop it in and not expect the volume to be much louder than everything else you've given me. I expect it to come back and be the exact same volume level, same pacing. So to me, that's an interesting kind of area that I wonder how that is done on your end to kind of be consistent.
Well, I think the first rule of voiceover is to expect that every project will have pickups. Never expect that what you send out won't need some sort of modification. I mean, it's part and parcel of the job. And there are a couple of videos on this channel that I've recorded where I've actually gone through the process to show people how to do that. Where you should always pull up the project that this pickup's being related to, pickup being the line that's changed or whatever, where you are reading along to your own voice and you hear the voice in your headphones until you find the pace, till you find the tone, till your intensity is matched where it feels, it's indistinguishable, you from the recording. Because you can't just go in there flying blind and expect to get it. So
Yeah.
you've got to listen to it. And then as you read to it, and once you feel you've got the pace and the tone, the tempo, and the energy level, proximity to microphone, all of that plays into it. But you can hear it. When you're in the sweet spot. Then you hit
Right.
record, then you read your lines. And then that way the client, again, it's plug and play. They can drop it in and it should be virtually seamless at that point. I'm really glad you brought that up because we do those kind of things. I mean, I know I do pickups all day. I mean, it's just a big part of what I expect it with every project, and that's the way we do it. But yeah, those of you who are watching, just search pickup, and there'll be a couple of videos where you can actually watch me do that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Anything else that you can say to help us serve you better?
Yeah. So I think probably another challenge that I have is just the pricing of services. I think can be, somewhat confusing, specifically when I'm trying to estimate. And I think that comes from two areas. The reading rate, which can be calculated on all these online calculators differently. And it comes from the rates themselves on a per finished minute. Like, I've gotten some quotes in the last the last several weeks, and the range to me seems to be way out there. I mean, I'm seeing quotes coming in for $20 per finished minute, all the way up to $150 per finished minute. And to me, in my world, that is a humongous range that
In anybody's world.
anybody. And so it gets a little confusing when I'm trying to estimate in my head, right?
Yeah, yeah,
About how long is this script going to be, and then what's the going rate that I know to be the going rate, and so therefore that helps me establish my budget. So then when you reach out and you get script records, samples recorded, and part of that is for me asking them, can you give me an idea based on 1,200 words? You know, give me an idea what this might cost if you did it, and you just get such a wide range that it's like, wow. I mean, we're talking about $500 versus $1,500 depending on, and to me, I'll be honest, you know I don't see a difference in somebody who charges 35, $40 per finished minute and somebody that charges 150. I'll just be to be candid with you. I don't hear a big enough difference to justify that range. So my
yeah.
question to you then is, what's up with that humongous range?
I asked the same question, Richard. Yeah, what is up with that? It's interesting because there are, you could go back to years ago, people would refer back to a union rate card. Well, now the unions have their influence has waned and is much weaker. And most people who are hiring voiceover for e-learning are not going to hire union talent because the rates of which they become accustomed to over the decades. As a matter of fact, those people are struggling to find work now because
Right.
everything's cheap, everything's cheaper, everything, technology, products and services. And it's the same thing, with voiceover. There are very few people. The whole idea of like $100 plus per finished minute. Wow. I mean, for e-learning, I'm not talking about commercial work. That's a whole other discussion because it's in relation to what the return on that investment is. And certainly if you're doing a project for, I don't know, let's say General Electric to all of their employees, as opposed to a mid-size or smaller firm where they're, communicating to 100 people. I understand the return on that is
Right.
going to vary. But, that 30, 35 to 50, $55 has kind of become the established sweet spot for e-learning. I mean, if you look at the bulk of professional talent who do that, that's where they live. Now, that being said, I can speak for myself, and I know it reflects a lot of other folks out there. Like there are some clients that I do work for almost every day. I've got a couple clients that we do a lot of work together. So my rates are going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be more flexible because if I'm doing 20 hours of work for you a week or a month, then I'm going to be way more flexible than that than if I'm
Mhm.
doing something once a year. I think that would be true in any business because even there, I mean, there's a place at which you really can't go below if you want to stay in business. But the point being, it operates like any other business. But this idea of 100, when you first told me that, we had this conversation, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I about fell over. I've done this. I know a lot of people in voiceover. I've done this for 17 years full time.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody. If they have ever asked for that, they've never admitted it to me, and I'm not aware of it. I'm obviously it exists. You've seen it, but like you said, you can't tell the difference that to justify it to that extent. So at a certain level, we are a commodity, voiceover talent. I mean, to a certain extent, you can interchange. I mean, obviously, our goal is you're trying to produce outcomes for clients. And the only way that outcome happens is if they're engaged in the content. Our job, if we're doing it right, you could plug in AI voice and do it for next to nothing. But the reason you hire a professional is because supposedly what we can do is engage that person. We understand the audience, we understand the context, we understand what you're trying to accomplish, and we engage them so they want to listen. Um, so, I'm kind of going off on a whole thing here, but to answer your question, all I can say is I think this is a remnant of decades gone by where there were very few people that were working as voiceover talent and their expenses were huge. They would spend $50,000 to build a home studio, which that's ridiculous nowadays.
Right.
And the expectation was that people would pay that. Nobody's, very few people, if anybody's paying that much money anymore. And so to voice, I'll say to you, voiceover talent, you really need to rethink your pricing structure. And if you're asking for like $150 a finished minute, if you're getting that on a consistent basis, I want to know who you're working with because I want to. No, I'm kidding, but I think you get the idea. I think it's such an outlier. I don't think that's the norm. But you make a good point. Can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
Like if somebody were coming to you, and it's not uncommon for somebody who's a newer talent, who's really not established, and they don't have a client base yet, or they're not going to charge typically as much as somebody like me who, I've done this for a long time. I have a big client base. Do you ever work with newer talent, or would you make, if they came to you and said, I charge $5 a finished minute, would that make you say, I don't know, I want to take it? Would the price alone scare you away?
Yeah, to
Okay.
me, I think yeah, it would, because I would kind of question, because to me, you know, I'm used to using voice over people over the years, and it's changed over the years. Prices go up, but around $25 per finished minute, up to, depending on the content or whatever, up to about 35 to 40-ish, in that range. So yeah, if I heard $5 an hour, like, okay, what's happening? What's
Okay.
but
Like the free puppies. Nobody wants a free puppy.
no, no, and it makes you, it's like, if I did what I did, and and you'll see it a lot, I can build a hour course for you for $200, right? When, depending on what the course is and the complexity, it could be more like 10, 15, 18, 25, $30,000. Well, if I'm doing it for 200, there's something not right. Right.
Right.
So it kind of,
Yeah.
you start to think, okay, maybe you've never done this before. Um, so I think we see that in e-learning, as well as, it's always a struggle to figure out what is that sweet spot for a customer. And I've always said, if you give a price out there and the customer doesn't say anything, then it's probably too low.
Right.
You know,
Yes. I've said that
so,
myself. Yeah.
so unfortunately, I've probably worked for way too low for many years. But I agree with you. I think I'm looking, for me, understand if you've done something for Disney or you've done Pixar or whatever, that's great. But I think, at least from my experience, and again, I'm on West Coast, so East Coast could be entirely different, right? My experience is clients having in mind roughly kind of what they want to pay for it, because already, and this is something we probably should talk about at another time, and that is this kind of thing where clients don't do professional voiceover because it's just considered way too expensive. And I don't get that, because for a couple $100, you can have professional narration done if you just are very selective in how you use it, and elevate your course like this easily.
Mhm.
And most clients will spend $200 a day coffee, right? So I just think that's an interesting area, and I think it's something I want to talk about or focus on at some point in the future, to kind of, because I've been using professional voiceover services for years, and when I hear people say, "Oh no, it's much easier, just have somebody inside do it," or whatever, I've always thought how ironic that is, because how much time do you spend on editing? How much time do you spend on buying all the equipment, and what do you do when the employee no longer works there and leaves, right? You can't do that. Of course, I guess you also run that risk with a voiceover person, that they no longer in business, but that's been pretty rare. I haven't had that happen yet.
That really brings us to an interesting point here, and I guess maybe a good place to kind of wrap up our conversation. But the fact that you and I have kind of teamed together to collaborate on creating something for content creators. So, and I'm sure we have some content creators watching this. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we got a working name for it. I don't know if it'll be the final, but it's basically e-learning narration, kind of a jumpstart guide. And what we're talking about, it's a course where, we're kind of sharing our experience on what that process looks like. And for me, it's good for people who create content. It's good for clients who are thinking about, I want to use professional voice over. And so kind of, I guess if you will, kind of opening the veil to, this is kind of how it works. With the caveat is, this is our experience. It may differ from yours, and la 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 and all that stuff. But in general, we've been doing it for a long time. I've done enough of it. I know it works, and clients keep requesting it. So the process that I'm using, I'm going to consider is workable. right? May not be the perfect one, but workable. But so this course is all about just kind of sharing our experiences, our insights into narration and e-learning. So what we're covering in this course is, talking about writing scripts, estimating pricing. How do you go about doing that? Once you have a finalized script in place, we talk about selecting, auditioning voiceover artists and how to find them. What are some of the ways you can find them, and how to go about that. Kind of interesting thing at the end we're going to touch on is the future of narration, right? Um, with the emergence of all this voice simulation and stuff, interested to kind of get a look at what's happening in that area, and your thoughts specifically on where do you see that going. Um, for me, I use text to speech narration for alpha builds because it's just quicker, and I don't have to worry about going to professional voiceover, having it done, having it go back and do a lot of it over. And that's been working for me. But, and I've used quite a few different text to speech, I've used the ones built into the application. I've got subscriptions to 2 or 3 other places that do. It's getting better, but
Mhm.
it's just not natural. It does not sound right. It doesn't pronounce a word quite correctly. It sounds very monotonish. And that's the stuff that I've been working with over the last several months. So will AI change all of that? I don't know. I suspect it will at some point. So, we're going to have a little piece on that as well, because I think that's of interest, because I think it can be used, but I don't think it's a replacement. Definitely AI is not a replacement for e-learning designers, developers either, if you're doing it correctly. So hopefully we're going to have something available in the next few weeks to kind of make get out there to people. So
Something to watch for. And I think what you were just saying, Richard, about AI will allow a lot of voiceover talent to sleep better tonight, because I don't
yeah,
think there is anything that causes voice talent more angst than the idea of AI of voiceovers. And I've talked about that several times on the
yeah,
channel. And so those of you who are interested in learning more, just search on the channel. You'll find some stuff there. At least my perspective. I mean,
yeah,
it's an educated guess. Who knows? All I can do is share my observations and where I think things are going. But Richard, again, I don't know why it took me so long to invite a client on, after our conversations and just hearing your insights, I just realized you're really the perfect guy to do this, and you are bridging that mysterious gap, because our work is it's very transactional. We don't really get to know our clients very well. It's very, hey, here's what I got. How much? When
yeah,
can you get it to me? Okay. And then, and that's for a lot of our clients, not all, but for most, that's it. And so we really don't know the thinking process, unless they volunteer that information. So you've lifted open the veil and given us a peek inside a place that we rarely get. So very grateful to you for that. Thank you.
yeah. Thanks. It's been enjoyable, and I think a lot of areas to look into and talk about and get a better understanding of how it works. And I think anytime, like I said earlier, it's all about that partnership that we need. Because if I work with Illustrator, they are become part of my company for that duration of time. And since I've always built my company off relationships and not transactions, as you know, I've come back to you many times to get help and advice, and figure out how to work more efficiently. So to me, I think there's a lot of areas to kind of explore in this particular type of relationship between e-learning design developers and professional voiceover artists.
Well, I look forward to continued conversations. Thanks again. Richard
Yeah,
Watson, President and CEO of Bridgehill Learning.